To the extent that we're experiencing today supply chain disruptions, not only because of the effects of the pandemic globally, but as well because of labor shortages, partially due to the pandemic, but also continuing on because people are just, for whatever reasons, not returning to work. And certainly rare minerals, for example, being very competitive in terms of their uses. What do you see as being the potential long-term impact on the economy of supply chain disruptions from the very elemental level on up?
Yeah. So it's a really good question. I think over the short term and the way we're kind of viewing it is that the supply chain disruptions, they're hanging around longer than first anticipated, but that they will dissipate at some point. I think there's too much at stake and too much motivation to kind of improving the health outlook where you can deal with some of that. But I do think over the long term, there's a couple of changes, and I'll talk about both the supply chain and some of the labor issues as well. I think the longer term impact is going to be a couple things. One, some of it is going to be somewhat higher prices of goods. But I think the other part will be companies reevaluating their supply chains and either, hey, how can we change this? How can we use technology? How can we do something local plus technology to replicate what we had before? And certain industries, it's going to be tougher, right? Maybe you have materials that are just too expensive to get in the US or closer, or you can't replicate. But I think a lot of companies are taking a longer look to have better preparedness and not assuming that global trade will be what it was. And I think technology is a tremendous part of it. I talked a little bit about Walmart, and that I think is a perfect example of that. Using machine learning, using artificial intelligence to improve and reduce your waste so that you're saying, whatever we have, it's harder to acquire, but we're going to keep more of these goods. More of it's going to end up on the shelves and not be wasted. I think that's a huge part of what we're going to see going forward in the long term, to say, hey, companies are going to use different methods to make sure they improve whatever they have and insulate themselves from some of these risks. I think on the labor side, in terms of people going back, a lot of the talk's been about benefits, but in looking at the data, that tells a small part of the story and is not the biggest driver. In fact, even with benefits expiring, you haven't seen, as expected. I mean, I talked about this a lot with folks, like benefits are going to expire. You don't see labor, supply spiking up. That's exactly what's happened in a lot of these places. So I think that was a poor thesis. Part of it is the benefits, certainly, but the other parts are that kind of concern for safety, people just saying, I'm not going back. And then, the second part is childcare, right? Childcare is going up. People are thinking about that trade-off and saying, what, is this the best thing? If you're in a 2-income household, maybe one person stays home because economically that just makes more sense. I think the other part of it too that's really underreported is people in kind of service industries or even in manufacturing that were in lower paying jobs. It is very cheap to retrain yourself to a job that pays a lot more. So if you have some time, which the benefits allowed, you can go and learn how to code at a basic level for $0.